Andrew, first off, would you agree with the notion that the movement seems to have lost a little bit of steam compared to previous weeks? And if so, what would you put that down to? The concessions, maybe, the political concessions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's inarguable that there has been some sort of diminution going on here. Of course, you can look at the estimates of numbers protesting right across France, and it's down about half in a week. So clearly something's happened. Clearly we have a much reduced desire to get out on the streets, to occupy those roundabouts, to kind of take to the streets and protest. I think one of the key things is that, of course, we had the Macron speech, the big address to the nation on Monday. That was important. That showed a lot of, I think, rhetorical importance. He took a lot of ownership for the problems. He admitted mistakes. He legitimised the complaints of the protesters, and introduced some tangible measures to remedy those. But I think it is important not to give Macron all the credit. There was enough people after Monday saying that his concessions were, a drop in the ocean and all the rest of it. Other things at play. Well, I mean, I think obviously the weather is a big point. People always talk about the fact that in Russia in October 1917, one of the reasons for the October Revolution was a surprisingly mild October. We're starting to see the weather turn and people be a little bit less keen to take to the streets. That's obviously something that affects just ordinary people in terms of their getting out and about. There's been some really good polling data that's come out of Le Monde from university researchers talking about the demographics of the movement. And one of the things we've seen is really the idea that many of these people were protesting for the first time. These aren't hardened protesters. These aren't people that are kind of used to going out and battling with police. Of course, there's a corps of casseurs and all the rest of it. But this is a broader movement which is really quite a diverse, broad group of ordinary people. So there is, I think, a certain exhaustion factor that comes with that.
Andrew, you mentioned the demographics of the movement. Interesting to see that it's a very disparate movement. So where do you think it could go from here now? I mean, is it going to die out? Could it resurge perhaps after the Christmas, New Year's holidays? Or could it take on some political form? And if so, how will it get over the obstacle of being so disparate?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the big difficulties, isn't it? I mean, obviously, the way that it's been organised all the time is through Facebook. And of course, that's one of its biggest weaknesses as well. The idea was that after the Strasbourg attacks, one of the things is people's reaction to it. First of all, it gave them pause in terms of wanting to go back out in the street, changes perspective of things a little, but it also unveiled the kind of, the Facebook culture, conspiracy thinking that comes around that. And I think that put a lot of ordinary people off the idea of what some of these people were saying that were involved with the movement. It kind of made things seem a little bit kind of, beyond the pale, as it were. So I think really what we're seeing is a slight kind of disaggregation of the broader movement. I don't think it will go away because I think the reforms of what people have started to call Macronism are still en train. We've seen, of course, your last story was about agreements to do with the climate accords, and those will produce extra burdens on tax to actually meet those measures. Macron has paused them for now, but the moment they resume, I think it gives people recourse, an easy way to get back to it. They know the way to the roundabouts, they know the way to the toll booths, they've already got the yellow vest in the car. So there will be resurgences, I think, although I doubt it will be on exactly the same scale. But this is something that will dog Macron, I think, throughout his presidency.
Now, Andrew, you're an historian of France and the Francophone world. Talking heads here in France have been comparing this movement to the French Revolution, to the sans-culottes, to the May 1968 movement. What are your thoughts on that? How does this fit into a broader French historical trend to protest, to kind of revolutionary spirit, if you like?
Sure, yeah. Of course, there's a famous quote from Philippe Varin, a historian, who talks about the idea that France is a kind of a historically conflictual political culture, in that it views its conflicts historically and its history conflictually. And I think that's really in evidence here as well. Of course, people have talked about 1789. This is about the kind of the attacks on toll booths is a kind of obvious precursor to the events that led up to the fall of the Bastille. It's also a space of socialisation. People are coming together and getting new ideas on the barricades. Likewise, people talk about 1830. We've seen the old liberty leading the people image by Delacroix making the rounds. And even we had a Bourbon come into the idea of the self-styled Louis XX giving his views on it. And Macron kind of derided as a citizen monarch and all the rest. I think actually the most relevant political conflict that we see is probably the 1953 movement around Poujadism, which talked about tax, which talked about kind of equality of taxation and earnings. But I think this has actually been kind of updated a lot. You could draw references, I think, to 1995, the grand protest wave there, about people really coming together and forming broad coalitions across different political movements. But actually, I think one of the things that's really important is the idea of the suburbs. This is something that's changed. The reason we have motoring so prominent in it is because we're talking about people that live in these peri-urban areas, people that kind of feel the impact on their income of these small measures, these small increases in taxes. And that's really who's been drawn towards these occupying the roundabouts. I think you can look at this as being a sort of, grand refusal in an age of commuter democracy. And this is something quite different. But important to say, a lot of people aren't talking about the movement, say, in 2005 as well.
Okay, Andrew, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there.